Think of a time when you experienced a conversation that left you with a new perspective, or perhaps an inquiry, or you might have felt that something has shifted in you after that conversation. Maybe it helped you gain a new level of clarity, or moved you to take action. That was a coaching conversation. Hello and welcome to the Coaching Conversation. This is your host Salah Kuwaiti. I am really excited today to have a friend and a fellow Agile coach, Mohamed Amr. And Mohamed is an Agile coach and a co-active coach, and also has been heavily involved in ORSC, Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching. I hope I got this right. Mohamed, welcome.
Welcome, Salah. Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. Very happy to be here with you in this conversation. I've been looking forward for that.
Absolutely. So what inspired you to get into coaching?
So that's a long story, but I'll try to bottom line it. So I've been in the agile space, I think, since 2008, and I've been working with teams like all my career, starting from 2005. But when I started my agile journey, I discovered that I've been working with a lot of teams, a lot of companies, sometimes as an internal coach. And later on, when I became a consultant, I was engaged with them as an external coach. And I've had the title of an agile coach for like nearly 6 or 7 years. And I suddenly realized that I did zero coaching. And what I was basically doing during that time was telling them what to do and basically giving them the answer. I was the expert and they were basically doing what I was telling them. And at that point, one thing that really resonated with me was the fact that all these teams, even the ones that were successful, they were mainly successful in adopting the practices in the doing aspect, as we call it now, and it wasn't sustainable. And what I realized later on was the being aspect, the work that you do in order to work with them on the being part, to coach them through change, to work on the mindset shift required to enable agility to take place. This needed a lot of work. And the main conclusion that I reached at that point was that I needed to start with myself. I needed actually to start my own transformation journey. And I needed to equip myself with the competences that I needed in order to influence such change and to, I would say, have a soft focus on the doing aspect and start focusing more on the being aspect. And that's where I started my coaching journey back in, I think that was 2015. Yeah.
Definitely. A lot of what you say, resonates with me. One of the things that I've been thinking about for the past several years is this idea of, how to become a better coach, how to become a better agile coach, specifically with, since that's our domain and we've been in that space for some time, but also how to become a better coach in general. And you just pointed to some of the different competencies around working with teams. If you're constantly telling them what to do, then that could be good in some respect, but it's not sustainable. And at the same time, just doing the practices, following what you said, is not really changing them in terms of the mindset. So you've been on this journey, and we've talked before. You went through the coactive coaching, coactive training, and you also went through the ORSC training. What helped you decide in terms of which one to start with, or which one you want to focus on first?
So I remember this was back in 2015 when I was reading Lisa's book. And at that point, I heard about coactive coaching at that point from Lisa. And I got to a conversation with her, I remember, and I told her, I really want to carry out this mission of developing myself and later on developing other coaches in the Middle East and Africa. And I really want to do this right. I've been doing it wrong for the last 7 years. So I want to actually start doing it right and help others avoid this period that I basically wasted, I would say. Not wasted, but definitely it could have been completely different if I've gone to that journey earlier. So I remember during that conversation, she told me, well, there is coactive and there is ORSC. But, at that point, ORSC was, and it's still considered as an advanced coaching program. And the advice that I got from a lot of other coaches was to go first to coactive coaching. So coactive coaching, it's one of the most recognized coaching models in the world. And I would say it's a foundational model for any professional coach. Like the cornerstones and the principles of that model, I would say applies to any professional coach, whether you're working with individuals or couples or teams or organizations. I believe coactive as a model is a foundational one that all coaches should use in their coaching, or it should influence the style of any coach. And this was my start. So I started to learn coactive coaching, and I started mainly coaching individuals. And then I was planning to go for ORSC, but I decided to continue with coactive certification as well. And during those 6 month certification, I really learned the competences of a coactive coach. And what interested me a lot, and I started to bring the same philosophy in my agile coaching trainings, was that CTI, the organization that came up with coactive, their philosophy in the coach development is very interesting. So they say during the 5 classes that you take with us, our main goal is not to teach you how to coach others. This is a secondary goal. Our main goal is for you to go through a self-transformation journey and to really transform as a person before you are able to coach others. So it's like, you cannot give what you don't have.
Yeah.
So this was very interesting for me, because going through this journey has been the most powerful personal transformation journey that I've ever gone through. And after finishing those 5 classes and going through the certification, then that's the vehicle where they start to focus on how to develop your competencies as a coactive coach, how to actually develop you as a competent professional coach after you have gone through that transformation journey throughout their 5 classes. It's inspired me actually to do a similar job in my design for the agile coaching classes that I teach, which is basically starting with working on yourself as an agile coach. What is your threats? What is your limitations? What is your strengths? Who are you and who are you not? And what are the areas that you need to grow? What are the edges that you need to cross yourself before actually working with teams?
I like the way that you're talking about how it starts with self-awareness, and there's a little bit of vulnerability also, like I don't know if this is working, and I need to explore how other areas can help me. A lot of us, I mean, including myself, I started also was inspired by the work of Lisa Atkins, the Agile Coaching Agile Team book, and that's how I learned about coactive and how I wanted to go through that the program, and it was definitely a transformational journey for me. And it helped me realize that having an expertise as an agile coach or an agile practitioner is good. It's still needed if you're going to work in the agile space. That's fine. But coaching and professional coaching is a whole different ballgame. and
Exactly.
a lot of people don't really have that awareness around the distinction between the different roles. And I think that's one of the things that Lisa and the Agile Coaching Institute at the time, they brought to the forefront the model of competency. What are the different competencies around Agile coaching? So you've done the coactive, you've done the ORSC. So how has that impact the way that you work with teams or individuals or organizations? What have you done differently now that you have gone through these extensive and rigorous programs?
So the evolution or the change has been massive, I would say, like in every aspect of what I do. And what I love about and what I really appreciate and I'm grateful for in that transformation journey, whether going for coactive first or through ORSC, it has been the transformation that you go through, and not just developing your competencies with coaching relationships, with coaching individuals, with coaching leaders, coaching them through change, but also in just being a better version of yourself. And stepping into, when you step into a better version of yourself, then you can actually start to have a better impact in all aspects. So going through that journey made me a better teacher, it made me a better trainer, it made me a better facilitator, and it made me a better mentor and a consultant as well. Like when you were saying, there is the aspect of vulnerability, there is the aspect of being okay with not knowing, sometimes being okay with detaching yourself from outcomes, and being okay with detaching yourself and trusting the wisdom of the team, and being okay with failure. And actually, what was interesting about coaching is how you're developing yourself as a coach, it impacts your other competencies and other hats that you wear as well. Like being a competent coach impacts definitely how you are as a trainer. It impacts how you are as a mentor. Like, in my opinion, I would say the least effective approach to mentoring is direct advice.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of other techniques that you can have and you can share, which doesn't involve direct advice, and you can still have a really big impact on your
Mm.
mentees, whether you're working with teams or individuals.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, going through that journey, it has really impacted me greatly. And
Mm.
in two aspects, I would say again, whether coactive on the individual side and working with leaders, working with individuals, and ORSC on the other side, it evolved me as a systems coach, and it
Mm.
brought me what we call the systems lens in seeing things, how to focus on the relationship, or what we call relationship systems, actually, which are systems are, in ORSC definition, a group of individuals that are interdependent and they have a common goal or a common identity. So
Mm.
when you take that definition and it applies to everyone, and the interesting part is it applies on individuals as well, because the first system is basically you.
Mm-hmm.
You are a system by yourself. You have a lot of different voices, you have different aspects of yourselves, you have different identities, and they are all part of who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
they can work together, they can have a conversation together. Sometimes they are at conflict, and you can easily see individuals also from a systemic lens.
Yeah, this idea of, advice has been the very first thing as a consultant or as an agile coach. People think that, okay, now
Yes.
that you're an agile coach, you're going to go around and tell people what to do and give them advice. And obviously that a lot of people who have been through this journey and have experience around this idea has realized that, okay, this is not really the way it works. I mean, it doesn't work, and it's not very fulfilling, not for you as the coach and not for the people or the team that you're working with or even individuals. And one of the things, from Coactive, the one of the cornerstones that I really like is this idea of that people are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, right?
Mm,
They
yeah.
know how to solve their problems. You're not there to just fix them. You're trying to grow them, which leads us back to the mindset or the being that you talked about earlier. So in hindsight, if you think about this journey of Coactive or as in the professional coaching space as another competency to add to your agile toolkit, some people might think, okay, what's the difference between gaining this experience over time by practicing instead of going through a coach training? What's the value of having a program and going through it versus just learning it as you go on your own?
That's a really interesting question, and I believe we all went through that phase of
Mm-hmm.
actually abusing the word coaching. you know. It's one of the words that are really abused a lot, especially in our industry. I can tell you, I've had the title of an agile coach for 6 years.
Hmm.
And for me, I imagined that a big chunk of what I was doing with teams was coaching them. For me, just working with them on a project and showing them how it's done, guiding them in
Hmm.
practice adoption, for me at that point, that was coaching.
Hmm.
And now, when I talk to a lot of leaders, when I talk to a lot of scrum masters or potential agile coaches, I see that they are using the same term. They're using coaching to describe something that has nothing to do with coaching. So there's a general perception that anything that you do on the ground with teams and basically guiding them, that's some form of coaching.
Hmm.
So the first thing that I believe is very important is for people to understand the distinction between
Hmm.
coaching and mentoring, between guidance and giving advice, and between coaching. Then there is the other layer, which is oversimplification of coaching. Because again, you see a lot of people telling, okay, so coaching is basically if someone has a problem, then rather than telling them the solution, you just keep on asking them questions
Yeah.
until they find the solution on their own. And then
Or
the
get
answer, well,
frustrated.
exactly. Well, yeah, that's not coaching as well. Like coaching, it doesn't boil down to just asking questions. And what's interesting is that coaching is not about the topic. It's not about the
Hmm.
problem that your client or your coachee brings. Actually,
Hmm.
your problem or the topic is just the entry
Hmm.
point to a conversation that is basically an exploratory conversation, and that is mainly around what's going on with the person rather than the topic. Yes, later on during that conversation, you get back to the topic or you relate whatever awareness that has been brought to the coachee, you relate it back to the topic somehow. But in essence, coaching is around working on the person. And
Hmm.
when this is around the teams, or when you're working with teams, then coaching becomes around the relationship between those individuals. It becomes around the human aspect of that team, the being part of that team, the relationship together, the culture, the atmosphere that they create as a team, which enables them to be a high performing team, which enables them later on to deliver the best outcomes. And just going through any coach training, I think if you start with the ICF, the basic ICF competences, it might sound simple, but definitely it's not that easy to develop your competences in that area. And the benefits of going through a formal coaching training is that it doesn't just teach you the competencies, the tools, and the skills. It works on you, actually, yourself. It brings you the awareness necessary for you to transform, to evoke that transformation in you. That will actually enable you later on to evoke such transformation in others. So, yeah, I would say it's a term that has been heavily abused, but I'd say the good or the bright side that I'm seeing in our community now is that Coactive and ORS are very popular in the Agile community. And we're
Hmm.
seeing a lot of Agile coaches going through formal coach training, whether Coactive or NLP or ORS.
I think this is a great, a lot of great points you're making about the value of going through a formal coaching training. Anyone can pick up a book and read about coaching. I always use the metaphor of learning how to ride a bike, for example, or learning how to drive. You don't learn
Mm-hmm.
about riding a bike or driving a car by reading a book. You learn about it by actually doing, like going and doing it, maybe having someone by your side helping you or supporting you in that journey until you're able to find the balance, pun intended here,
Yeah.
to go on your own. So the idea of going through the coaching program is not just about, okay, I'm gonna gain the knowledge. It's actually more than that. It's like you said, it's a practice, it's the structure, and then you get to learn from people who have actually doing professional coaching for a long time. So you also get feedback around what areas you could improve in and practice even more. So I want to pick this theme here or path about, like, that starts with self-awareness, starting with someone like you and me. We realized, okay, this coaching is not really coaching. It's not really working. Something is wrong. Something
mm,
is not right, and we want to do better. And it took self-awareness, but it also took willingness to step out of our comfort zone, and that could be very difficult for people to step out of their comfort zone.
oh, yes, it
So
is.
whether that's at individual level or team level or organization level, it's still the same. Like, this ability to realize, okay, now that I'm aware that I can do better, now I have to make that decision. I have to make that choice that I need to learn how to become better. And
Mm.
that will require me to step out of my comfort zone. What was that like for you, or as you gone through this journey, or even after you completed the programs, you find that now I see other people in that same position that I was in a long time ago?
Yeah, you reminded me with my first day in coactive training. I
Hmm.
remember, was it the first or second day probably? And I just remember that I was so uncomfortable in that class,
Hmm.
to the extent that I was seriously considering in the second day of the coactive fundamentals of just running away and just dropping from that class, because they really stretch you in that class. There was a specific exercise, I think, about the archetype, which is basically they start to observe you throughout, I think, 2 days in the class, and then they come up with an aspect of a personality or an archetype that captures something that completely it's not you. Like,
Yeah.
they are really kicking you outside your comfort zone, and they ask you then to act the whole day using that archetype. And for me, this was extremely uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I remember that those edges that I needed to cross, or the times that I stepped out of my comfort zone, they were countless actually during my coaching journey.
Mhm.
But actually, reflecting on this right now, it makes me more grateful for that, because a good coach or a competent coach is the one who's able to expand in his or her range,
Mhm.
the one who is able to actually adapt and to be fluid and agile with that range.
Mhm.
Sometimes you need to bring different energies, you need to bring
Mhm.
different aspects of yourself, and this requires a lot of courage and vulnerability as well.
Mhm.
The other thing that I actually started to make use of it is to be more relatable to agile coaches in my region. Like, I used to be a very rational person.
Mhm.
And for me, just showing or expressing emotions or working with emotions has always been very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And this changed 180 degrees during in my journey with Coactive. And it has changed, it changed a big part of me that is related to vulnerability and to expressiveness, right? And expanded my range in that part. So I'm always keen to bring those examples and to mention this aspect of my journey when
Mhm.
I'm working with other agile coaches. I was able to, to tell them, guys, I really relate to where you are right now. And this is my journey. I've been there and I've gone through this. It was not comfortable for me, but this is what I went through. And sharing this and stepping into that vulnerable place actually provides a safe space for them, and it encourages them to really step outside their comfort zone. Because
Mhm.
sometimes they could be overwhelmed. Sometimes they would easily say, wow, that coaching thing is not for me. So when you start with stepping into that vulnerable place and telling them that you've actually been in the same place before and you've had your own edges to cross, so they actually get a bit motivated and they feel at that point that you're relatable. You start to be more relatable to them rather than them seeing you at a different level, and they see that disconnection or gap between you and them.
What you say, resonates with me, because I
Mm,
I remember my first coactive, the first day of the coactive fundamental class as well. And that was definitely an experience that stretched me and got me out of my comfort zone. And
Mm.
I remember the one thing, the model that the co-leader drew on the flip chart in the beginning was that model of, like, the unconscious incompetence, and then you move
Yeah,
to conscious incompetence. So you start to quickly realize that you become conscious about your incompetence, and then hopefully
exactly.
you move up to become consciously competent, and then at some point, as you practice and apply, you become unconsciously competent. So and that happens not just once, it happens all the time. And really, when
Yes.
if you just connect to the conversation that we were just having to
Mm.
this model, you will find, okay, first we were unconsciously incompetent, like we didn't know that what we were doing was not really coaching, and then we became
Yep.
consciously incompetent when we started to go through the professional coaching program. And so that's really the idea. What you're saying is that the team goes, whether individuals or teams, they go through this cycle. They have this,
Yes.
they think they're doing it, but then they realize, okay, this is not really the thing that we're supposed to be doing. And then they decide at some point, if that's the gap between when you realize that you're consciously incompetent and you want to become consciously competent. That's the choice. That's where you start to say, okay, am I willing to cross that chasm and move to that
Hmm.
space, or am I gonna accept that I'm unconsciously incompetent, but I'm fine with that.
Exactly. And what I love about that, when you mentioned that model, it reminded me that sometimes when you reach that conscious incompetence phase, you're basically overwhelmed by your incompetence. And it's very easy at that point to say, well, the hell with it.
Yes.
That's not for me. I wasn't built for that. And you can just quit easily.
Yeah.
And I've had that moment.
Hmm.
I remember I've had that moment in the second day of the coactive class.
Hmm.
And I had that moment of doubt where I was saying, okay, no, 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 that's not for me. That's way uncomfortable. And then my rational side as well started to say, well, that doesn't make sense. You won't use this with teams. It
Hmm.
doesn't make sense to learn all of this. So it's very easy at that point to get deeper in that overwhelmed state
Hmm.
and to basically quit. And this is where I think this is where we need to pay closer attention to the leaders and to the agile coaches that we work with. And this was one of the reasons actually that made me pursue that path of actually developing and mentoring and educating other agile coaches, because I really wanted them to go through that transformation journey. I really want for them to go through this self-discovery and to really cross that big edge from the unconscious incompetence phase to start to be at least consciously competent
Hmm.
at first. This is not a comfortable period, I know, but I think I'm getting more and more involved in that because that's the showstopper that I'm seeing with a lot of coaches, right, and leaders right now. They become overwhelmed and then they say that's not for us, and then they easily quit. Yeah.
And that may be a good segue to another topic that I was hoping to explore. It's the
Mm.
idea in the coaching lingo, or at least the professional coaching or coactive that we learn in other programs. They refer to this as the saboteurs or inner critics. Like, when you start feeling that, okay, you're about to change something about yourself and you might be embarrassed, or you're
Mm.
gonna go back to this beginner state, and like you said, that's you start hearing the voice, okay, maybe this is not for me, maybe I should just quit right now. And those are the inner voices that this change might stir up as you're about to take that step. How do you handle this type of, those inner voices? How do you quiet them down or manage them? Or I know we've talked about this in other conversations, and but
Mm.
yeah, I would like to hear more about that from you.
So first of all, yeah, that's for me, that's one of the most interesting topics for me. And I love working with whether individual clients or teams or leaders or agile coaches, working with them on dealing with those voices and being, I would say, in the right relationship with those voices. So basically, our brains are wired to respond more to threats. So there is part of our left brain which is called the limbic system. And limbic system is basically responsible for our survival. So each of us, we have this survival or this protection mechanism, which are those different voices that gets active or gets triggered when we face a danger, whether a social or an emotional or physical danger. So these voices, they get developed in our brain depending on how we were raised and depending on the environment that we've been part of, our schools, our families, our work, our teams that we work with. All of these environmental factors, they impact the strength of those voices in us. And I would say the master voice or the boss that runs the show here is called the judge. And that's our internal judge, which is responsible for judging ourselves, judging others, and judging circumstances and events that happens to us. And it's very easy when you are part of, for example, if you're part of a judgmental environment, whether it's back at home or team or the organization culture that you're part of, then it can actually strengthen your inner judge. And at that point, you can have a lot of those thoughts like the ones that you mentioned. This is not for me. I'm too bad at this. I wasn't built for this. Or no, I will fail at this. So your judge basically fuels those thoughts in you. And at that point, it's very easy for you to be consumed in those negative emotions like anxiety at that point and fear of failure. And you would easily back off at that point. And what's interesting about those voices is it's not only the judge, but the judge actually runs the show, and the judge has another 9 different saboteurs that work with that judge. And the framework that captures the judge, the saboteurs, and their profiles is called the Positive Intelligence Framework. And it has been developed by Shirzad Chamine. And he used to be the CEO of CTI, the organization that brought coactive coaching. And that's where the term saboteurs also comes from when it comes to coactive coaching. So back to the topic, when I work with clients or when I work with coachees, first of all, I start by assessing their saboteurs. So they go through an assessment and then they start to see, so what are the top saboteurs? What are the ones that are stronger in us? So all of us, we have those 10 saboteurs, but they vary in strength based from one person to the other. So first thing is to gain awareness about how strong they are in me. And this happens by going through the assessment and then by debriefing that assessment, by explaining to the coachee what does each of those saboteurs mean? What are the characteristics of these saboteurs? What are the thoughts that happens in your mind that indicate that this saboteur is active? What are the negative emotions that they bring and can help you detect that this saboteur is active? And most importantly, what is the justification or the lie that they use in order to become stronger in your head? So, for example, your judge has a very convincing justification that the judge used. It tells you if you're not basically consumed in guilt, shame, and disappointment, then you will actually fail again and again and again, and you will repeat your own mistakes. So you won't succeed, you won't move forward in your life unless you're consumed in that guilt and shame, so that you don't repeat your mistakes. And sometimes this is very convincing to us. Sometimes we're basically consumed in guilt and in shame. And eventually this leads us to not actually repeat our mistakes. But the price that we pay at that point is being consumed in those negative emotions. What's interesting is that there is a way for you to take responsibility of your mistakes and learn from them, but without being consumed in those negative emotions.
Yeah.
And that's the other part or the other side that lives in our brain, which we call the sage voice.
Mm.
And the sage voice is the part of you or your brain that actually process the negative events and the failures in your life, but process them through positive emotions and not negative emotions. And when we talk about positive emotions, we mean here empathy, gratitude, love, peace,
Mm.
acceptance, navigating choices according to your values and to your purpose. So through processing all the events that happens to you, even the stressful and the negative ones, but through those positive emotions, then you're able to reach completely different outcomes, and you're able basically to navigate through your life, whether professionally or personally, in a completely different way. So yeah, that sums up, I think, the work that we do. And so basically we try to help the coaches access the sage voice, strengthen that voice, access it more often, and
Mm.
we help them to weaken the voice of those saboteurs. So, but in order to weaken I would say, the unhealthy impact of those saboteurs, you really need to understand them. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be in relationship with them. You need to understand how do they want to be helpful, but
Yeah.
in a completely unskillful way,
Yeah.
and how can you switch to a different aspect of yourself, which is your sage, and
Yeah.
actually tackle the same situation or event, but
Yeah.
in a completely different way.
This is great. I love this topic. Maybe we should have another episode on that, specifically on that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I like this model as well. I actually came across this model after I did the second class, coactive fulfillment. And then in
Mm,
fulfillment, one of the things that, we explore the techniques, as you know, we explore the values, the vision, some of and then saboteurs also, because they get in the way. If you want to try to fulfill whatever you want to bring more fulfillment, then the
exactly.
saboteurs will come up. But yeah, I do like the work of Sherzad as well. I've explored it a little bit more in the past and recently as well. I like that we give labels to those saboteurs, because sometimes we don't know what's happening. Like, who's talking? Is it is it me, or is it someone in those inner voices, or what? But yeah, I like how you summed it up. It's like, the guilt and the shame and the judge running all these, because it's exhausting. At some point you need to figure out,
Yeah.
okay, how do I manage those inner voices? How do I manage those saboteurs so I can focus on the things that can serve me in my journey, whether it's learning or even life in general. So that's a rich topic to explore at some point. It's
Mm,
interesting because a lot of the models out there have those two paradoxes, like this type of two forces, like the saboteurs and in coactive, I think they call them the captain, or the captain and crew, or now
yeah.
the leader within. And other, I did the leadership circle, and they say, the creative versus the reactive. So there's two opposing.
Hmm.
And it's always puzzled me, that the idea, oh, okay, do you start to work on the saboteurs first and kind of lessen the impact of those, or do you work on your muscle, captain and crew, or whatever other language you want to use, like the leader within,
Mm.
and strengthen those, right? It's almost like, you're trying to lose weight. Do you eat healthy, or you go to the gym and exercise, build the muscle? I think it's a combination of both, but I'm curious, what do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with you. It's a combination of both. Like, and I like the metaphor that or the analogy that you brought, which is when you want to lose weight, if you pay more attention to eating more healthy food, then
Hmm.
there will be progress, but it's not enough. Maybe especially if you also want to be fit and want to build muscles, for example. And the
Hmm.
same thing goes for exercising without eating healthy,
Hmm.
then that also won't be enough. But there will be progress. The same thing happens when you're working with the saboteurs and your sage or your inner leader. I would say you need a combination of both, but sometimes you're able to have interim progress.
Mm.
And when you focus on one of them, and I've seen teams and coaches, it's easier for them to detect their saboteurs and to try to work on their saboteurs more than trying to access their sage. But I would say my approach is basically to bring a bit of both, to see holistically how to approach any stressful situation. So part of we all face stress in our lives, whether personally or professionally. And no matter how much work you've done, you can easily get hijacked by your saboteurs,
Mm.
especially when the more stressful and the
Yeah.
more negative, or that's how our brain labels the
Hmm.
situation, the more that you're easily hijacked by your saboteurs. And it happens to even the best of us, it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
So the point here is to learn how to detect it on the spot and how to recover quickly. An analogy that Shazad uses, and I love it actually, is imagine that you're putting your palm on a very hot surface. So once you start to feel the heat, what you do is you lift up your hand right away. So you feel the pain, but you let that pain becomes just the trigger for you to recover quickly and pick your hand. The same thing with saboteurs. We want them to, first of all, to learn how to detect those saboteurs quickly, how to detect them, how to detect these thoughts and these emotions when they happen, but avoid being consumed in them and try to switch to a different perspective. It's like you have two glasses,
Mm.
two different glasses, and you have a choice around which pair of glasses you want to wear and
Mm.
see with. There is the lenses, or there is the glasses where you see it through saboteurs. The same event, you can see it through your saboteurs and you can see it through your sage. So
Mm.
if your saboteurs are the first ones, and usually they are the first ones to see that event that happens to you, because your brain it's much faster in responding to threats. So once there is a negative event that could easily be perceived as a threat, your saboteurs get triggered right away and they get activated. The point here is to work on how to detect them and then switch to a different perspective, switch to your sage perspective, or switch to a positive perspective in seeing that. So in essence, I would say you always need a combination of both, but sometimes I've seen coaches that they have had some interim progress by just working on weakening their saboteurs, detecting their
Hmm.
lies, detecting their voices, without paying a lot of attention to strengthening the other side. But ideally, I would definitely work on a combination of both.
You remind me of this. I got interested recently. I was just curious
Mm,
in psychology classes.
mm,
I took this class called Positive Psychology. Actually, it was taught by Martin Seligman, who was like the father of positive psychology. And really,
mm,
the idea that you mentioned is this. He gave this excellent analogy of gardening. Like when you're trying to garden, usually you get the weeds out and you kind of prepare the soil before you
mm,
plant the seeds, right? But it's not enough to prepare the soil, right? If you want to if you want to grow vegetables, or you grow flowers, or whatever, you need to prepare the soil, but you also need to grow. Just preparing the soil is not enough. You might have gotten rid of the weeds or the things that are in the soil, but if you stay there, then okay, maybe you can manage. Maybe it's not gonna you're not gonna grow, right? You're just gonna be at a state where you're stable. So what you're saying is,
mm,
maybe, yeah, you can gain a little bit by managing your saboteurs, or quiet them down, or gain a better awareness of these voices, but it's not enough. If you want to grow, if you want to learn, it's not enough. You need to do some other learning, and start to focus on what you want rather than just what you don't want. And that's the also the lenses. You can see
mm.
the same situation with different lenses. One is like, okay, this is what I learned from this, and then fill in the blanks. Or, this is terrible, I can't believe I did that, I'm not going to do it again. And that's the end of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I resonate with what you're saying. And also, it reminded me with one thing that I haven't mentioned, which is what we call the brain rewire.
Mm.
It takes time and it takes a lot of practice for you to be able to rewire your brain. And it's like actually creating a new habit. So, in order to create that new neural pathways in your brain that leads to your sage, then you need to keep practicing and keep doing this a lot in order to rewire your brain to approach things different.
Mm-hmm.
So picture like a fork. When an event happens, it enters our brain, and once it enters our brain, there is like a fork. And at that point, it can either go left or right. Now, you want to develop the brain muscles that allow you to control how you want to reroute this event. You want to have this event go to the right and be processed by your sage, or you can leave it and it will naturally go left and be processed by your saboteurs. So developing that brain muscle that will enable you to rewire your brain and strengthen those pathways that lead to your sage, this takes time and takes a lot of mental exercises, and it takes a lot of coaching as well. So the help that we always give to our client, and you can also, I think, relate to that a lot, is helping them by detecting those saboteurs when they manifest themselves in their behaviors. Because sometimes I would say, sometimes you can easily detect the saboteurs. I can easily, for example, detect the saboteur that is active in you through a behavior or through a tangible behavior that I'm observing from you. But most of the time, this inner struggle and this inner hijack is happening in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be able to detect it when it happens, but we still help them by asking them questions that bring them closer to that, by sometimes accessing our intuition when we feel that there might be a saboteur sneaking around. So we do help them also with that detection, which would help them trigger that part and go to the next step, which is activating their sage. Yeah.
It's a story that we have, maybe that we tell ourselves, and once you realize that this story is not true, or you question the story that you're telling yourself, then you can write a different story, or change
Exactly.
the story, right? So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's fascinating. All this, these things that we started with, like the journey of an agile coaching, as an agile coach, and then we're talking about how the saboteurs can hijack the way that we think and the way we respond to things. And it's interesting because agile, if you look at agile beyond the software, it's really the simple definition is how to move quickly or respond to change, and be able to move quickly. And
Yeah.
it's hard to move quickly if you're carrying heavy weight on your shoulders. It's not gonna be sustainable. So I think what you're saying is, okay, let's become aware of the weights, and then let's lighten up the weights so that we can move faster. And that's
Yeah.
really the idea of helping individuals or teams or even organizations move quickly and be more agile.
Yes, I love how you also linked what we were talking about to agile, because that's very important, I think, to link this up again to how can this support the agility, whether on the individual level or the
Mm-hmm.
team or the organization. And building up on what you said, one also very important aspect is that those saboteurs are always trying to protect you from failure. They're trying to protect you from negative events, and they process those events through negative emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
it causes what is familiar to us in the agile space, a fixed mindset in
Mm-hmm.
seeing those events and situations. So your saboteurs fuel
A
your
fixed
fixed
mindset.
mindset in approaching
Mm-hmm.
situations and outcomes. So working actually on exposing those self-limiting beliefs and exposing those negative thoughts and negative emotions will help you actually to rewire your brain more towards having a growth mindset, because you
Yeah.
cannot experiment, you cannot be agile without being tolerant to failure,
Mm-hmm.
without being okay with failing and learning from it and becoming curious around the
Yeah.
learning rather than judge and blame yourself for the failure. So it all adds up to the end in
Mm-hmm.
supporting agility, like you said. Yeah.
And that's a really another area we can talk about in the future, is the idea of
Yeah.
How did this impact the culture and change in organizations if everyone is running with this story of self-limiting beliefs and saboteurs, if everyone is in that fixed mindset space, it becomes very hard to help teams or the organization overall become agile, because there's constant reinforcement of the agile of the a fixed mindset. So that's a topic on its own on how to counter the mindset. But
Yeah.
is there anything that you want to leave us with, or things that you would point to before we wrap up here?
I think what I can leave you with is the same message that I always communicate to the agile coaches and the facilitators that I work with,
Mhm.
which is your journey to become a better agile coach requires you to go through a journey of becoming a better version of yourself first before actually learning how to be a better coach or a mentor or a teacher or a facilitator with
Mhm.
others, whether teams or organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, becoming a better you, or a better version of yourself, is a good place to start and wrap up this conversation. I appreciate your time, Mohammed, and thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and I hope we can do it again.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, definitely would love to. Love the conversation and thank you for the invitation. This was a very interesting conversation, and yeah, looking forward to continue our rich conversations.
Thank you. Hey, thank you for listening. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about or take action on. Remember, take action and get clarity, then repeat.